Well, g'day, friends, family, stalkers, and others. I came here with really good intentions because I got a lot of my mind I want to talk about, but unfortunately, I've been suffering quite amount of stress from from work because when you try and do your best to do what you're told to do, and then you find out that doing that to the best of your ability is still stressful, and you're still the one that is in the wrong for doing everything in the right. So I'm not quite exactly in my correct frame of mind for what I intended to be when I decided I was going to make this video. So forgive me if I seem a little bit stressed and out of sorts. I'm going to try and get on with the job anyway because I've got more on my mind that is important to me that I think needs to be discussed. And it seems to me like I'm living in a fairly stressful time, and I don't know why it should be that way. Hence, I put on my Santa Claus shirt so I can pretend it's Christmas. Hey, so I think first and foremost, what we need to do is lubricate the throat and say, "Hey, it's another day. Thank goodness we're still alive, each and every one of us. So cheers." Try and put all my work stress aside and get back into the moment. There's one thing that's occurred to me, and I don't know if any of my current regular followers, or not that I've got followers, don't get me wrong, any people that watch my channel, because hey, nobody should follow anybody. You know what I mean? We just listen to each other to bounce ideas backwards and forwards. That's my mentality. So the people that bounce ideas backwards and forwards off me is obviously I run around in a lot of different circles. My job has absolutely nothing to do with my philosophy. It's what I do to pay the bills. It's what I do. Probably wasting a good 80% of my fucking life so I can pay my bills, so I can do this sort of stuff and get ideas out. And to me, getting the ideas out is more important than anything. And at one time today, as I'm driving home, I actually saw a bus coming particularly fast towards my direction. And I was going the normal speed limit towards its direction. And it did occur to me that should something slightly mechanical go wrong in either of our vehicles, that the impact that would make could be quite devastating. And a lot of the ideas that I've got in my head are going to just disappear and never be heard from again. So this is why I'm doing this, and I'm just going to put a little. Is that how you do it? Was it C like that? I don't know. All I'm doing is I'm putting a little copyright in there, not to say you cannot use my information, but to say that it is copyright, and with permission you may use it. And if you use it successfully and in a profitable way, then I'm not going to be greedy. I'm not copywriting it to the patent point. I'm just telling you, these are my ideas, and if you would like to use them, please go ahead and use them, and use the fuck out of them. Use them to the nth degree. But if you end up finding yourself making a good, decent, too much more than you should profit from them, like most people do who take other people's patented ideas, then that little C there says that you're agreeing that if you do use my ideas, and I come back and find you using them sometime in the future, and I'm finding myself a little bit destitute and in need of some you know, remunerance is it? Well, I can't even think of the word because I'm a little bit stressed at the moment. That somehow I should get some sort of accreditation for it, then 10%, 10%. I'll put that next to it as well. If the pen works. 10%, if you use my ideas for profit, then off the profit you make after everything, after tax and so forth, then you agree to give me just 10% of that. And that's all, And if I don't need it, I'll either say, oh, don't worry about it, or I'll donate it to a more worthwhile cause. And I can tell you, I've got so many worthwhile causes that if you could donate me 1,000% right here, right now, then I will be able to make a huge difference. But we have to do these things one at a time. And I'm not in it for the money, as you know. I make enough money doing my slave job and getting a lot of stress from it that I don't particularly need, which is why we need to have a few after work beers. But if you followed me, one of the things I've been elucidating within my mind for a long time now, for many decades. See, when I was a surfer, I loved the feeling of surfing, basically. But you spend a long time out in the water waiting for the perfect wave by the time you're good enough to know that you don't just want any old wave, stand up and go, oh, and it's all over. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of energy expressed to get a little bit of free energy back. As the years advanced and I just got sick of dealing with the crowds, I'd go to isolated beaches and body surfing. It's a lot more nicer and calmer way of harnessing energy from nature. So you'll spend a little bit of time just beyond where the waves break, and then when the bigger one comes, rather than paddle furiously and stand up and be a mad surfer, the body surfer just learns to go with the flow, and sometimes all you have to do is turn around and sort of push a little bit, and you've got the sensation of flying. Other times you might do one or two strokes just to try and get a bit of barrel. yeah. There is free energy everywhere from nature. And the more you know about free energy from nature, the more you know about the vortex energy. The vortex energy is everywhere in nature. When you take the plug out of your sink and the water starts spiraling down, that is vortex energy. You can spend a lot of time arguing backwards and forwards over which direction it goes, which hemisphere you're in. It's irrelevant. Don't even worry about it. It's just forget about it. It's just you can get so lost in the details and argue over semantics so much and for so long that you're missing the point. Yes, vortices flow in different directions from the wake of a boat and obviously from the wake of a sun, as we saw in the previous video I made about the Coriolis effect and the sundials. It's all natural energy, natural vortex energy, and vortex energy is the secret to free transport, to free flight, and to what I hope to be the future of us getting from A to B. Like how good would it be to be able to just step out your door and say, right, calculate where you're going. You put on your GPS. Okay, you've got to go to there today. Today is wind and weather and temperature. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, hop in your little we're used to sitting into a car, aren't we? The word car means carriage, something to carry you. So basically, we're sitting into a new form of carriage, a lighter than air one, I like to think. We set our coordinates. The little program's going to sort it all out for us and feel every little nuance. And it can do all these computations for us because we've sorted all this shit out. And basically, then we just levitate off the ground using lighter than air technology, helium, and boom, off we waft. And as far as I'm concerned, I would think if we did it correctly, the power that we use in the internal combustion engine currently, the weight of the internal combustion energy and the weight of the combustion and the friction of the tires on the ground and the costs and all the rest of all these things of travel that we use now for the current motor carriage is easily outweighed by understanding and utilizing the free energy that's instantly available once we get the correct vehicle. So the correct vehicle is the Blimp, the Helium Blimp. That is the correct vehicle. The reason why that's the correct vehicle is because it's weightless. And it doesn't mean it doesn't have weight or mass or stuff that without helium would have weight, density. Pardon me, my throat needed lubricating a little bit further. What it means is that because of density and buoyancy, we can overcome the idea of gravity. Gravity, when you boil it down to its nuts and bolts, it's not bendy space-time at all. It basically just means weight. So weight is the displacement of the medium that you're in. It's the Archimedes principle. So basically, it's easier to understand in water because water that is a much more dense medium. So that's where the Archimedes principle comes into effect. But much easier, much more understandable, is because then it's the volume of the water that is displaced which gives buoyancy. So we just have to apply that principle then to the air, because this is the age of Aquarius after all. And if we want to travel through the air, we really want to use the Archimedes principle in the same sense, rather than the current sense of force and thrust and overcoming a force of gravity, which is pretty much what all flight currently does. And it works. It's not just theory. What it works by is by overcoming the density of the vehicle by thrusting enough air downwards, it gives it lift. And in the, say, the aeroplane, for example, because of the shape of the wings, it gives the thrust through the air, and the shape of the wings is what gives it lift. In the drone, it's more about the of thrust downwards that just gives it lift. So it gives it that. What I want to do is overcome the noise factor of the bzzz or the or, didn't know I was a noise machine, but when you sit in an aeroplane, you can hear the noise of those engines, and you're sitting inside an enclosed capsule. You imagine what it's like outside. Well, you can hear planes from a long way away. So the idea of silent flight, and some birds are good at it because they glide, but sometimes you can hear a crow go by and they go because the way they're flapping actually creates noise in the air. You know, I've been listening to the birds a long time. You'll learn a lot from nature. So if you've looked at some of my older videos, I haven't made a great lot about them, but the one that intrigues me the most is the one about the helium blimp and vortex energy. And I even have done a few here and there about that using an egg. If you push the blunt end of an egg forwards, it flows naturally. If you push the sharp end of an egg forwards, it gets stuck. It doesn't work. And yet everything that I've seen in aerodynamics and so forth in human ingenuity, not everything, but a lot of, always puts the sharp end first. Whereas if you actually look at a lot of the big ships or the blimps, the airships and everything, if you really look, you'll see that they end up putting the blunt end first. And the reason for that is because when the blunt end hits the air just wants to collapse back around it. And as it does, it collapses around the fat end with very little energy, which propels it forward, which, if I'm going to draw an image of it, which I will, say that's your whale, as that air hits here, it gets dispersed all the way around, and as it falls back around, it wants to go that way, which then pushes this that way. That is your basic vortex energy. And it's very crudely drawn. But if you understand it, is that the air gently hitting here, just collapsing back around it. And it will make it go that way. As opposed to if you were trying to put the sharp end forward, then all the air hitting this way is getting dispersed out that way. And it's doing nothing. It means all the energy has to come from behind to keep thrusting. So you are wasting so much energy to keep thrusting through. Whereas, if you're hitting it blunt end first, the natural flow of energy just wants to wrap back around you and say, get out of my way. So the blunt-ended blimp is like the chicken egg theory, is that the egg always wants to come out blunt end first, where it takes the least amount of energy, and then as everything relaxes around behind it, pushes it forward. So that's vortex energy in a nutshell, is the forward thrust. The next part that I really want to get out of my system, I don't know if I've got the ability to actually draw a good sketch of this, but it's something I have to get out just in case, like what if, for example, tomorrow as I'm driving to work and on my way to work, a bus does lose control, or a truck or something, and we have a head-on collision, and for some reason then I just have to leave this body because it's no longer any good to me. It's not going to serve any purpose then if all these ideas I've got in my head are suddenly lost, which is why I've just put this little C up there, because this is something that I think could revolutionize the concept of transport and everything in general. Okay, so bear with me because I do have to lubricate the thread. So the concept of the helium balloon, and any balloon is actually that way shaped, as we'd all know. If it had a little basket, it would be sitting down here. The concept of the, can you even see that? Yeah, I think so. The concept of the balloon, the reason why it's that shape is because from the balloon's perspective, it's trying to gain lift against the pressure of air. So you've got, this pen's on it. So you've got pressure of air is constantly down all across the, for all intents and purposes, we'll just assume the Earth is flat. I don't care what you believe. For the sake of this, and the sake of all nature of flight and everything, NASA related, aeroplane related, everything treats the Earth as flat and stationary. So we'll just assume that default position. You can make up your own mind later if you want to believe it's rotating 1,000 miles per hour underneath you and carrying all the atmosphere with you. For the sake of this, we'll just go with natural science and say the Earth is flat and stationary. So the air pressure is always pushing down, which means that the greatest amount of pressure is down here. That pen might have seen better days. But since we're in air now, all the air pressure is downwards upon the balloon. And again, it's the same principle here, is that it's going to go down that way and wrap around. The air is naturally wrapping around the balloon to assist it with lift. And the only reason it's getting lift that way is because all of this in here is less dense than all of this out here. Otherwise, it would either gain equilibrium and just stay there, or would sink back down to the ground because there's a pressure equalization. But the reason the hot air balloon, or helium, either way, works is because it's less dense than the surrounding medium, which is allegedly being pulled down due to gravity, although we could just say it's just its own density, and that the density lesser than it pushes up. Either way, you can use whichever belief works for you. If you really think that there's a theory of attraction, it's in fact, I'm going to have to drop that. I just have to drop that now, here and now, because when people describe water as always seeking its level, it's as natural as, say, the water in this. See, if I lift it up, it stays there, it stays level. But if I tip some out, I don't want to make a mess on the floor, so I'll just tip some into this hole here. It's a clear case that natural density and buoyancy means that the fluid wants to seek a level. And what happens when it hits my body is that I've created a place of resistance. I stop it from going further. But if I didn't put in my body and missed, it would fall to the floor. And that would be a bit of a disaster because I'd have a bit of a mess to clean up. And that's not what we want. So the natural urge of fluids is to seek their own level, which you'll hear people who try to argue against that and think they want a decent argument. They'll say, well, oh, so water is sentient? It wants to seek its level? It's like, not necessarily. It's just fluid mechanics or the fluid dynamics that says that fluids will seek their own level. It's not like they want to do it. It's just that they do it because that's the nature of fluid dynamics. And so if we're going to use the same argument that the people who will argue against water being sentient, it wants to seek its level, then the easy way to dismiss that then is just to say, well, so anything more dense than the air just wants to seek the ground because it's attracted to it. Ooh, it's got a fancy for it. Ooh, look at that. I'm so attracted. Ooh, I can't help myself. It's got a big booty. Ooh. Fucking boom. You know what I mean? That's what they're saying is that, well, if water wants to, because it just does, everything else, ooh, so attractive. I can only do so much of that before I have to put some more fluid into the bodily system. You know what I mean? They literally say, oh, I've got mass. That's got mass. Yeah, let's get it on. I'm so into that. I'm attracted, man. Look at that booty. That's gravity. The theory of gravity says, I'm attracted to you. Oh, fuck off, bitch. Don't treat me like helium. You know what I mean? You know, if you really want to go down that path, that's what they're basically saying. So, less dense, up. More dense, down. No gravity, no attraction, no urge, no seeking, just nature doing what nature does, which is kind of like what parents have to do when their children grow up and find a partner. That's all it is. It's just nature doing what it does. Yeah, the whole density and buoyancy equation could easily be written out in the musical scale. It easily could. Why is it called a scale? Why do we measure weight with scale? Why do we have up and down in music? But people have to question why up, why down in everything else that's just natural density and buoyancy, and everything sits on the base because the can't do nothing without a base. It's all about the base, baby. Without a base, you got no foundation to build upon. You know, you can have music wafting through the air as much as you want, but you need a base if you're going to build. Oh, geez, what will we call it? I don't know. A building. Yeah, building. We'll build a building on base. What if you want something beneath it? Oh, we'll have a basement. Why has it got a basement? Well, because it's basically below the base. You know, everything has a base. Base metals. Yeah, that's the foundation of everything. And that's why the more dense notes are more bass. And the lighter they get, the higher they go. Boom. Frequency. Vibrational frequency. So what I want to get across in my short amount of time that I've got left on this earth is the frequency and vibration and energy of the universe is the secret to everything. And so if we're going to build free energy vehicles, like where's my fucking hoverboard for man, a board is always the base, isn't it? The surfer needs his board. And so if you're going to hover in the air, then you need to have a higher frequency and vibration than the air itself. And I'm not talking about electronics at all. I'm just talking very basic. What's that word again? Basic density and buoyancy technology that we should basically have known for a very, very long time. And I'm just going to use this green pen to hold this place for a second. Well, like this place. Some more dense fluid into a less dense place so that I can create a higher frequency and vibration. So if you understand the basics, basics of frequency and vibration, less dense means up. So let's say then we turn this thing on its side, which is the whole point of the equation. And what you want at the back then is a tail fin, a bit like a goldfish. And instead of having the basket at the bottom, because it'd be out here, it would upset it. So because we've twisted it, you basically put your little basket down here, or you might just remove the wind resistance and put it just there, just like the airships and stuff of old have always had the basket or the platform where the occupants are riding in can sit and stay at relatively stable drift. So now we've got the air, obviously it's still pushing down, but we've equilibriumized this, right, by having this full of helium, which I think is not. I'll have to look into that. I'm not too concerned about the he, hi, ho, ha, FIFO and stuff, but we just got helium anyway. And down here then we would have the air. Because the helium rises and the air obviously doesn't. So I often wondered about this, and this is all really I want to get across in this entire long rant of the video is that big equilibrium of the gases. Is to say that the bigger the volume of the helium, the greater the lift. Yeah, you're with me here? But if you had inside a, as we would, because you'd have a tank full of helium so that you could compress it out to expand that bit to give lift, you've got more than one option on how to overcome the lift value versus the drop value, because obviously you want to lift to fly through the air, but eventually you're going to want to come back down. And because the price of helium is quite expensive, then what you really want to do then is have some sort of little engine in here that can recompress that helium back into the compression chamber that it came from in the first place, And then because it's compressed into a smaller volume, therefore it's much more dense, and that will cause it to sink. That's what gives you your down, is the density. So the less helium goes into the tank, the more your blimp will drop back down. But this absolute genius idea, I never even thought of it before, but it's obviously it's so simple now. It kind of makes me a little bit sad that I didn't think of it earlier. But instead of recompressing the helium into the tank, what if instead you compressed more air into the air part of it, which would automatically compress the helium in its own right, making it more dense and more weight of the air. And that would make you drop. So you don't even have to worry about it. Once you've got your big bubble of helium, which is sufficient to give you lift in the first place, all you need to do to displace it, rather than have expensive or heavy or complicated pumps and valves to recompress the helium, you can just have bladders. Like everything's bladders, basically. Like a balloon is a bladder. So you got bladders of air, bladders of helium, and you can have multiple bladders of them to do it. But just fill up some more bladders of the air, and in the same process, it just makes, it takes up more of that area. That's a good word, isn't it? And so it comes back down. That was just like, but I realised that there's far more to this than just that very simple. That very simple idea. The big one that I want to get across is, so say you've got your helium blimp and you've got a big wing sitting on top, right? So this wing is sitting on top and it's going that way. So all the air is obviously, gently wafting towards it and going around. But it's also going under this wing. And this wing is given lift. You can see that, this wing is sitting on top. I know I'm not the best artist, but we're looking in 3 dimensions here. Now, well, the most important part of my helium blimp design is always this, which is I guess I have to do it in 3D. And it is this. This is something I've got real and tangible that I can demonstrate it. So if you had it facing that way, the air is getting ejected out through this wing, because that is a wing, that's that, and pushing it all out that way. Just so I understand the idea of the vortex wing. I've described that a few times before. So the vortex energy means that as this little ring is pushing out air all the way around it, it's picking up all the air plus all the air given from the front of the blimp to give forwards drive. And that works just beautifully simply by, if inside here you had compressed air chambers pushing air out, into this thing that, the structures that are holding it in place. Each one of them is an air compression chamber, pushing air out, driving it forward is not a problem. So you've got this big wing across the top, which of course is naturally covered in big solar panels. There are solar panels across the top just to gather enough electricity to drive air compressors, to compress air, to push it out through the back vortex. But the hardest thing for me to describe then, which I really want to impress upon, and I don't know if I have to take this secret to my grave because I've tried to describe it before, but say for example that's the direction, the passengers are down in their little thing under here, under the wing. This is where everybody's sitting, drinking their pina coladas and whatnot, all flying towards their destination. But across the top, you've got this wing, stabilizing it, getting solar energy, doing all the rest. But what if you're going into a headwind? A headwind blowing this way. It's like, yeah, that will actually assist a little bit. But what if then inside this wing, you had an opening where you can open a kind of a rolling shutter. So just sort of open a little bit. And as the wind went into it, then inside this wing, you've got these one-way air valves, which are another form of Tesla valve, by the way. Tesla have already designed all this stuff, that captures all that wind and puts them into another sort of vortex chamber, which pushes it all back into that outer ring, so that the stronger the headwind that you are facing, the more you're able to capture that energy to push you forward. That's the one that I want to really let it be known. So you've got a flat and level wing, which is kind of like a sandwich wing, like a biplane, but it's not that thick. At the very front of it, you've got a rolling shutter. So the harder that the headwind hits you, the more you open up those shutters and actually take that headwind and channel it and funnel it through those Tesla one-way valves and force it out the back wing. Gives you more thrust. And if you haven't got a headwind that's coming from you from behind, then instead of that, all you do is up on your wings is you put out some big bloody parachute type sails and get them to pull you forwards even faster as well. So you've got multiple options when it comes to an airship. And as far as I'm concerned, the only way we're ever going to breach Antarctica and get across to find out what's in those other lands is with an airship, because all of this technology relies on nothing more than some solar energy for some batteries to stay charged, which is pretty simple, and wind, natural vortex energy. And if you really wanted to make it complicated, which we don't have to, that in itself is a simple enough design by being lighter than air using helium. And if you've got no access to helium, then the alternative to that is to use electrolysis. And electrolysis easily separates hydrogen and oxygen from one another. And hydrogen is actually more buoyant, less dense than helium. The only problem with it is how explosive it is, whereas helium is very flame negative. So, you can have an explosion going on in your airship, and helium won't react to it. It will counteract the hydrogen effect. But hydrogen, if something went wrong and you just got a little spark, it will just go kaboom. So that's where that can be overcome just by rethinking the storage tanks and how we do it. So hydrogen is another way. Hang on a second. If we did it with hydrogen, it can be done very, very economically. And you could technically just inflate individual balloons. You just have to find a way of making it fire proof, absolutely fireproof. But on the plus side of that, if you're using hydrogen and oxygen for some amount of the lift, say you needed, for whatever reason, an emergency, or the Greys were attacking, or the US Air Force was at you could have strategically placed jets anywhere that you needed to and use that hydrogen booster with some oxygen, which is basically, that's where you're getting into rocket science. But you could use that for some extra instant boost. And if you power the whole thing on that technically, then you could probably get around the entire world in the same amount of time that the ISS does. No, it doesn't look anything like it. But you know what I mean? If you combined hydrogen for lift with oxygen in the correct sort of chamber and shooted it out through a nozzle, then technically you could also combine that with rocket fuel technology. I prefer just to have free flight, stable, sensible, no time rush, ability to travel as required, but there may be certain times where you need that little bit of rocket technology. So I just really wanted to stress that the front wing, the front of the wing concept, just in case I never get a chance to build it for myself, exactly as I've been planning for so many years, because it seems that working in a slave job is getting me nowhere. And that as much as I got these ideas in my head and have so much technology to share, it seems that I am doomed because of fate and so forth to go back to my slave job again, get up at 4 in the morning and go back and do it. And, you know, I'm not in it for the money. Never have been, never will be. I'm in it for the ideas and getting this technology out there. So please, somebody have a think about this, because I've already thought about how I would present this, say you went on the, what's that, Sharks channel, I think it's called, or the, you know, one of those ones where you take your idea and you ask somebody for some, I'd like some investment in this. So not only could I show how, if I just put a pedestal fan in front of the model of this, how my little thing would fly directly towards it, just to do a model of it. But, you know, you could combine a little bit of the drone technology for the small models, but I'm against the noise side of things, but you can do it. One of the other little things that, just to whet your appetite for the things that go through my brain is that what if on this side here you had a camera pointing out here, and on that side there you had a camera pointing out there, and then just under the wing you had a projector, and that projector projected what's out here, and the projector under here projected what's out there, and technically you could make the entire blimp invisible. All right, thanks for listening. Have a good one.